Some people think that climate and weather are the same thing, but they are not. Both weather and climate involve variations in temperature, precipitation, and other environmental factors, but the weather is only the daily conditions of Earth's atmosphere, and climate refers to the average conditions over long periods of time. The microclimate is the environmental conditions over small distances, for example, in a city. Imagine one portion of the city being dry and hot, and the other being humid because of rain. The main force that shapes our climate is solar energy. Some of that energy is reflected back into space and some is absorbed and converted into heat. Some of that heat radiates back into space and some is trapped in the biosphere. The balance between heat that stays in the biosphere and heat lost in space determines the Earth's average temperature. This balance is controlled by concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor, which are three gases found in the atmosphere. These gases are called greenhouse gases, and the greenhouse effect is when the greenhouse gases trap sunlight energy in Earth's atmosphere as heat. Organisms occupy different places in part because each species has a range of conditions under which it can grow and reproduce. These conditions help define where and how an organism lives. These conditions are called a niche. Tolerance is the ability to survive and reproduce under certain environmental conditions, such as temperature. Every species has a different limit of tolerance, which they cannot go beyond of, or else they would die. Depending on the species' tolerance, their habitat is determined. Resources refer to any necessity of life. Each species have their own different range of necessities which they need in order to survive. Some organisms attempt to use various essential resources which sometimes are limited. Competition occurs when organisms attempt to use those resources in the same place at the same time. Competition can occur both among members of the same species, which is called interspecific competition, and between members of different species, known as interspecific competition. All animals must eat other organisms in order to survive and obtain energy and nutrients. But there must be a balance. This is where the predator-prey and herbivore-plant relationships kick in. Predation is when the predator captures and feeds on its prey. Predators can affect the size of populations in a community and determine the places prey can live and feed. On the other hand, herbivory is an interaction in which the herbivore feeds on producers such as plants. Herbivores can affect both the size and the distribution of plant populations. Sometimes changes in a population of a single species, called keystone species, can cause a dramatic change in the structure of a community. Symbiosis is the relationship between two species who live closely together. There are three types of symbiotic relationships, which are called mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Mutualism is pretty self-explanatory. It's a relationship where both species benefit in each other. Parasitism is a relationship in which parasites depend on organisms in order to get nutrients, and commensalism is when one organism benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed. Ecological succession is when ecosystems change over time. Successions that begin in an area with no remains of an older community is called primary succession, and the first species to colonize barren areas are called pioneer species. Secondary succession occurs when an existing community is not completely destroyed. Succession occurs because every organism changes the environment they live in. The major biomes are tropical rainforest, tropical dry forest, tropical grassland, desert, temperate grassland, temperate woodland and shrubland, temperate forest, northwestern coniferous forest, boreal forest, and tundra. Underwater organisms are affected by a variety of environmental factors. They are affected by the water's depth, temperature, flow, and amount of dissolved nutrients. Water depth influences aquatic life because of the sunlight. The sunlight region near the surface is called a photic zone, and photosynthesis can occur in this zone. Below the photic zone is the dark aphotic zone, where photosynthesis cannot occur. Freshwater ecosystems can be divided into three main categories, which are rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, and freshwater wetlands. Pond is an ecosystem in which water either covers the soil or is present at or near the surface for at least part of the year. An estuary is a special kind of wetland formed where a river meets the sea.